The Cellar.
So, in this video, I wanted to do something a little different. Today I'm going to be discussing some of my favorite true crime documentaries. These are not in any particular order, and at the end of the day, there are plenty of documentaries that I myself have not yet seen. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the list. True Crime Garage. True crime podcasters Nick and the Captain have been captivating true crime lovers for close to 10 years now. From researching, I found that their first episode was uploaded November 13th of 2015. In the 9 or so years since their first episode aired, Nick and the Captain have continued to grow. Their show dives into tons of true crime related topics, from some of the most popular cases to ones you've probably never heard of. The pair just recently hit 742 episodes, and with a runtime of anywhere from 40 minutes plus on each, there's just no shortage of content for those craving a true crime deep dive. Nick tends to give the podcast a voice of reason, while narratively driving the stories forward, while the Captain brings his humorous commentary into the mix in order to offer some levity at times throughout the episodes. I personally have been listening to these guys for around close to 6 years myself, and I highly recommend their absolutely top-notch podcast. If you do decide to give them a listen, their podcast is available on all places podcasts are found. Also, let them know The Cellar sent you their way. Dr. Death. Dr. Death is a podcast produced by Wondery that focuses on egregious cases of medical malpractice. The podcast is hosted and reported by Laura Beale and first premiered September 4th, 2018. Season 1 tells the story of Christopher Dunge, a Texas neurosurgeon who was convicted of gross malpractice after 31 of his patients were left seriously injured after he operated on them, and 2 patients died during his operations. The moment I dove into this first season, I was absolutely hooked on this podcast. I don't want to give too much away, but seasons 2 and 3 dive into 2 more different doctors, and they're just brilliantly put together. Now you may say, "Hey, Cellar, I thought we were discussing documentaries." Well, True Crime Garage is basically a long-standing true crime documentary-style discussion podcast, while Dr. Death is a full-on true crime documentary-style deep dive into these cases. What's even better is that Dr. Death has now made the leap over to TV. If you subscribe to Peacock, you can watch the TV series Dr. Death over there now. Both seasons are fantastic and I highly recommend them. But before you dive into the television series, I have to first recommend you either listen to the podcast, or you can watch a version of the podcast that has now been turned into a full-on documentary, that being Dr. Death, the undoctored story. There is so much to love about the podcast, TV show, and TV documentary. This is hands down one of the best true crime deep dives to have come out in the last handful of years. So if this sounds like something that's up your alley, I highly recommend you dive into it today. Lover, Stalker, Killer. Releasing February 9th of 2024, Lover, Stalker, Killer recounts the true story of how auto mechanic Dave Krupa became embroiled in an online dating nightmare that resulted in years of stalking, harassment, arson, and even murder. The documentary, directed by Sam Hopkinson, leans heavily on interviews with Krupa, law enforcement officials, and other main players involved in the case. They do a good job of reconstructing the events surrounding the perpetrator's crimes. Dave Krupa even plays himself in many of the film's dramatic reenactment scenes. The doc also features a shocking twist, which, if you're not already familiar with the facts of the story, will likely throw you for a bit of a loop. I actually just recently watched this documentary on Netflix, and it was quite the little roller coaster. Now, is this like the greatest documentary I've ever watched? No, but it's extremely well done. For some, keeping the twist a secret throughout may be overly obvious. In fact, my wife figured it out about 10 minutes into the movie, but it's still an interesting behind-the-scenes look at what stalking and manipulation can ultimately do to someone. It truly shows the lengths that some people will go to. The ultimate quote from this documentary was a line that stated, "If I can't have you, then no one will." There's no better way to encapsulate what this story's truly about. The Most Hated Man on the Internet. The Most Hated Man on the Internet is a 2022 three-part Netflix docuseries that covers the story of Hunter Moore and his website, Is Anyone Up? Is Anyone Up is a peace site where people post stolen and sometimes hacked photos. The documentary dives into the struggles to take the website down, its primary focus being the story of Charlotte Laws, as she does everything in her power to remove her daughter's explicit photos from the website. If you know anything about Hunter Moore and the website Is Anyone Up, then you know this was something that a lot of people were talking about between 2010 to 2012. Hunter Moore would be known at the time as the king of revenge P. Lots of pictures of women and men within the music scene at the time, including some band members, would wind up on the site. The documentary really dives into the rise and fall of the website and the unbelievable ego of the one and only Hunter Moore. If this is a topic that you would like to know more about, or you just find interesting, then I highly recommend you watch this documentary on Netflix. I Love You, Now Die, The Commonwealth vs. Michelle Carter. I Love You, Now Die, The Commonwealth vs. Michelle Carter is a 2019 American two-part documentary film directed and produced by Aaron Lee Carr and based on the death of Conrad Roy. The film had its world premiere at South by Southwest on March 9, 2019. It aired in two parts on July 9th and 10th, 2019 on HBO. The documentary dives into the story of Conrad Henry Roy III, an American man who died by at the age of 18. His girlfriend, 17-year-old Michelle Carter, had encouraged him in text messages to off himself. The case was ultimately the subject of an intense investigation, which led to an involuntary manslaughter trial against Michelle Carter in Massachusetts. If this is a case you've never heard about, then I don't want to dive too deeply into it, but it's a fascinating look into the mindsets of two young adults. The documentary dives into the thousands of texts that the two shared, all leading up to one fateful day in July of 2014. As I said, I won't dive too far into the case, but I do highly recommend this documentary. It really does a great job of pulling the curtain back and sharing what ultimately happened between these two troubled young adults. The case and subsequent trial and conviction were nothing short of controversial, to say the least. So yeah, I just wanted to do something a little different in today's video. As you can all probably tell based on what kind of content I create, true crime has always been a passion of mine, with Maura Murray's case being the first one that really pulled me in to a point of obsession. I've always been a huge fan of the Disappeared TV series, Unsolved Mysteries, the Robert Stack years especially. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of my list. Have you watched or listened to any of the content I discussed in today's video? And do you have any recommendations for me? I'd love to hear all your thoughts and ideas in the comments section below. And as I always say, thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store. Tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. For those of you that are interested, I have a Cellar Dwellers membership tier for the channel. It's $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks. So if that interests you, then please go check it out. I also have that linked in the description box below. If you'd like to submit a real-life scary story that you'd like featured on an episode on the channel, please do so using the email linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything that you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.